Thank you very much. Good evening to everybody. I hope my voice is clear.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you very, very much. You have taken on a very, very difficult task to discuss global architecture in the context of course, COVID and inclusive development. But you have a very galaxy of speakers after me. So that makes my life both easy and difficult. It's easy because I know that they will say all important things. Difficult because what do I have to say to you? So as a student primarily of history, I thought I'll spend just 5-6 minutes describing the global architecture as it has developed over the years, and the kind of lessons we can learn building further on it. So what is the kind of lesson that we should learn on what has happened all these years? The first thing to note is when we talk about the global finance architecture, we talk about the architecture's beginnings we can trace back to the Bretton Woods Conference of 1944. The turmoil of the 1930s, the depression, the beggar than neighbor policies had led to massive global instability. It was seen as a large threat, not just to individual countries, but to world peace. And even though the war was still in progress, the allied nations led by the United States, United Kingdom, decided that they must work on it. Now, they had three clear objectives when they met at Bretton Woods, only which partly was met. First was that you wanted stability in the global financial systems. You did not want exchange rates moving at a very brisk pace because that most countries had left the gold standard by then. And so they wanted to stabilize that. For that, of course, they created the International Monetary Fund. It's actually not a fund, but a bank in that sense. And it was underpinned by the strongest part. The underpinning was that the USA pledged to redeem gold at $35 an ounce. So anybody who went to the US Fed and said, this is my $35, please give me an ounce of gold, the USA pledged they will do that. So that was the basic reason why this could succeed in the beginning. The second was Europe had a huge load of rebuilding to be done. The war had caused massive destruction of property, physical infrastructure. This had to be rebuilt. And therefore, they set up an institution, actually a fund, they called it a bank, the International Bank of Reconstruction and Development, which we now know as the World Bank. Basically set up for Europe, for European reconstruction, because they wanted to reconstruct. It was just development, it would have been D, but it was IBRD. The third, where they succeeded only partially, was setting up an international trade organization. They could only set up GATT, an agreement on tariffs and trade, because something the agreement was not there. That WTO would have to wait for 50 years, 1994. But as time moves on, in the 50s, India and then one by one other countries started. Could I request others to kindly mute themselves as other countries started decolonization? Their development needs became important. Of course, they got access to IBRD, India did. But then the realization was, even though the IBRD money was cheaper than any other money that you could get, it may still not be enough for the really poor countries to emerge in Asia and Africa. Countries who have been ravaged by centuries of colonialism. They were not poor inherently, they had been made poor, they're pauperized by the colonial powers. And therefore, a new funding mechanism, a platform of funding called the International Development Association, IDA, came up. Extremely soft loans, extremely, as good as grants, as good as 60% grants, long window of non-payment, and then very low interest rates, etc. Because they came for contribution of the members. Unlike the IBRD, which raised money from the capital markets based on the equity provided by the member countries. IDA was purely funded by grants from the big, large developed countries. Ultimately, of course, both of them fused into the World Bank, so the Vietnam was separate. So this was still, by today's standards, a very small operations in the world. In the world of the 60s and all, the global financial architecture was largely seen as $35 to the ounce, which was stabilizing the international currency, which allowed Europe and Japan to really spring back. So in that sense, Bretton Woods succeeded for Europe and Japan very, very substantially. It succeeded partly in Asia, but much less so. and not till 1990s actually. Till then, poverty rates were still very, very high, and they were not delivering on inclusive growth in that sense. What started changing? Every success story has to have problems at certain times. A solution which works at a special time may not work at another time. The Vietnam War, the heavy American expenditure brought in budget deficits. Because America was the source of balancing everything, the dollar was strong, America lost competitiveness. And I think, I can't remember the year, maybe 1969 was the first year America ran a trade deficit. Today, globally, we associate America with trade deficits. 69 was the first year, if I remember correctly, on hereabouts, that America actually ran a trade deficit, which shocked the Americans. And they realized that their underpinning the world's economy was too high a price for America to bear. They had to change it. They changed it very unilaterally over a weekend at Camp David, where President Nixon and a few of his advisors decided to look at the world. One of his advisors said that we had all become Keynesians. This coming from a Republican administration was very unusual. But they effectively, America said, we will no longer pay out an ounce of gold for $35. Now, one, of course, as I said, was because the dollar was simply too strong and America was not competitive enough. So unemployment, you had plunging growth rates, and massive social problems that caused it. The second also to be mentioned was when the system started in the late 40s, mid 40s, all the dollars in the world were less than 15% of the gold reserves of the US Fed, the Fort Knox as it was called. By 1971, the dollars in circulation were of an order of magnitude to the amount value of the gold held. So if people actually lined up at the US Fed and said, give me my gold, give me the gold, you have the $35, USA simply did not have that gold. So that system had to give away for both these reasons. Gold had become irrelevant and dollar was simply too strong. It's easy to define a problem, it's very difficult to solve it. It led to massive amount of circulation, instability in the world. Then the oil crisis came, things went for a toss. But interestingly, a lot of things got developed. Even though the USA left the gold in that sense, refused to make it the currency of the world, it remained the currency of the world. It was the only stable currency. And therefore, even when the oil crisis came, the oil producing companies made lots of money. They put the money in European banks, who then issued bonds. These were petrodollar bonds originating in European banks. There was no United States involved. So dollars were being generated, issued in one sense, outside the United States itself. So the system informally accepted that America would remain at the core of the system. I will not go into, this was just the reason I've spent so much of time describing this first 25, 30 years, because that defined the system as it went along. Of course, the, as I said, system obviously could not hold. As an example, when Japan posed a very strong threat to American hegemony in that sense, the Japanese economy was going very strongly, prices were going up. It was said that the value of the land, the Imperial Palace in Tokyo, was worth more than the state of California in terms of value. All the major institutions in America, the Rockefeller Center, bought over by the Japanese. That fear of Japan was so strong that the West got together. That's why the G7 is important, came into being. And Japan was forced, on one hand, to go in for voluntary restraints on exports. We will not sell more than 100,000 cars, etc. And at the Plaza Hill in 85, they were forced to ramp up their currency, 100% appreciation effectively in a very short time. The story, as you can know, that at the end of the day, countries may have the principles of free trade, may have the principles of free floating currencies, but when it comes to the crunch, the national interest trumps, and that is what happened. Be it as it may, the 90s were the golden years, 90s and the first decade of the 21st century for the liberal international order, which was economically underpinned by the Washington Consensus. Again, I will not go into the details of that. And we thought that this is the new world which has arrived, which believes in deregulation, which believes in privatization, free trade, free flow of currencies, control of budget deficits. And that was the scenario accepted then. Except that the scenario was creaking because ultimately, again, the USA, from being the banker of the world, which Nixon got away from, became the bank of the world. Subtle difference. So everybody started parking their money in US. As a result, USA got massive inflows. The dollar got strengthened, which enabled very low interest rates in the United States, which allowed the USA to buy more stuff from China and other parts of the world. US consumers were happy, and it created a self-fulfilling problem kind of a thing, because this simply could not hold. People who should never have got loans for housing. Because of excessive money in the system, house values went up. People captured the increase in equity of the house. Say from the house value went up from $200,000, $300,000. This $100,000 increase, they could capitalize on that by refinancing their houses and use the money for consumption purposes, not towards building up an economic asset that could be used for repayment of the loans when it came to. Well, the crunch came in 2008, and then we realized that the system that had been built up, which had gone through changes, of course, many changes had gone through, had adapted, but the system simply could not hold. In 2008, we realized that. We have muddled along all these years. Many countries still haven't properly recovered from 2008. Others have, most of us have, but the trajectory of growth has definitely slowed down, especially from the year 2011-12 onwards. Globally, it has slowed down trajectory of growth. But COVID has hit us in this big way that suddenly everybody is in serious trouble. Literally everybody is in serious trouble. What are the kinds of lessons can we learn from this as we built up a new global financial architecture? I would draw 4 lessons from it. The first lesson is that whether people like it or not, the dollar remains the most important currency. Even today, there's a crisis in the world, people rush to put their money in US dollars, Trump or no Trump. So USA would have to be a very important part of any international financial system. But it will not be, cannot be anymore the predominant part which simply controls all the levers. As an example, today, you cannot take a major policy decision at the World Bank or the IMF, because both of them require a plurality of 85% voting share. Well, the USA has more than 16% voting share, 17%, I can't remember the exact figure, more than 15%. Effectively, without the USA on board, these institutions cannot take major policy decisions. So that obviously has to be understood. But yet, if you do not have the USA and the leading economies at the heart of this thing, you will not be able to give confidence to the markets. Ultimately, the world of financing is about confidence. Will my money come back? Is my money safe? Will it be misappropriated? Will it be seized? These are real fears, so people want that stability. That will have to be understood. And yet, what has to change, what must be understood, has to change, is that I'll give the example of the World Bank. Now, the World Bank, as I told you, is funded by the shareholders. We are there, of course, small part of it. When the shareholders put in the money, that money was used to raise money in the markets, which was then used to finance development. So you give assistance, loans actually, I don't use the word assistance, but it is assistance because in the sense that none of us could raise money at that cost. These institutions in the LIBOR days could raise money at, when I say World Bank, I mean ADB, African Development Bank, etc., is that they could raise money at below LIBOR rates, add their percentage to it, their cost to it, it would still be lower than what any of us could afford it. So in that sense, yes, but this money was repaid back to the World Bank. Now, a normal development assistance money, DFID, USAID, SIDA with a C, SIDA with an S, OSAID, the Germans, all these are grant money. None of us come back. Here the money is coming back. And effectively, the capital base of the World Bank is retained earnings. In other words, the actual equity contribution of the members is very, very small, possibly 5%, 6%, 95% is retained earnings. So you now have to understand a situation where the role of the developing countries has to be better appreciated. That today it's no more a handout economy, that even though many of them are suffering from systemic problems, that in the end of the day, they have to be brought on board and made much more equal partners than before. Even if some primacy is still left by the US and others, the others have to be given a much bigger role in the new democratic world. That is to be well ensured. The third extremely important point is that we believe in the Washington Consensus, but we saw that floating exchange rates can be good, but they're also prone to manipulation. Famously, the UK had to leave the European Monetary Mechanism, the EMS, in the early 90s. There was a massive betting by George Soros and others that this could be destabilizing, and that at a time when times are good, a lot of money flows into it. Times turn bad, the money suddenly flowed. That's why the word hot money is used. And it has led to major structural issues in countries like, say, Thailand, which had a very strong baht because the money rushed in. You were taking short-term money, investing long-term. This mismatch led to serious problems. Now, if you have a minor liquidity problem, it can be sorted out. But if the size of the problem is very big, it's no more a liquidity problem. It becomes a structural problem. How does one cope up with it? So I think this dilemma of countries trying to have floating exchange rates and control of interest rates and inflation obviously cannot sustain. And therefore, how do we manage it? I hope others can answer this, but I think we'll have to accept certain limitations on the free flow of money. The present minimum international tax is a very bad idea. It is structured in a bad way. I think that should not be there, but countries need to then negotiate to find proper solutions to all this. Lastly, and as a fourth point, and I'll end with that, lastly, any new financial architecture that is looking into it must take into account the kind of havoc wreaked by COVID, the slowdown in the early part, and now COVID, which has come in, which may have fundamentally changed some of our normal assumptions about growth. For example, in a situation like this, where economies have contracted, in the case of India majorly, others also, a loose monetary policy, while they prevent bankruptcy, taken beyond the point and not supported by fiscal policies, it only means people will hoard money. They will retire expensive debt, but not invest. Why would they invest if the existing factories are running at 40 and 50%? Investment makes no sense. They will simply hoard the money. And if we get into a deflationary cycle, that is fatal. And therefore, while keeping debt financing sustainable is very, very important, in extreme cases, you cannot bind yourself to rigid figures of debt to GDP ratios. You would need a fiscal boost to generate demand. If you don't generate demand at this stage, rather than wait for things to naturally even out, as we saw in the 30s, they don't even out. The Depression ended not because of New Deal, it ended because of public investment in the Second World War. The massive munitions program, that changed it. At this moment of the world, COVID has shown us that capacities everywhere are begging. People are out of their jobs, or they're working informally, working in low-paid jobs. If they don't change it right now, you will get stuck in a deflationary. And if you get stuck in a worldwide deflationary situation, one country can be managed, but the deflation situation is much larger. I think we'll be in for a serious trouble. So if you take these lessons from our experience of 1944, 45 onwards till now, I think we will be able and should be able to devise a much better global financial architecture. Thank you very much for this occasion to speak. I look forward to listening to the eminent speakers that are shown. I'm very, very impressed with the list of speakers. I purposely did not take their name because there are many of them and I may slip on a name. I didn't want to make that mistake, but I'm waiting to hear some of the really experts going to speak on this subject. Thank you very, very much. I end.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. You have really touched a very intricate and complex issue of the international finance of 80 years story in a very meticulous way, sir. You have shared the role of the dollar and then the exchange rate and then the debt financing and the role of US into the international finance and the role of World Bank. It's a very beautiful, sir, that you have touched every area, the theme which we are organizing this webinar. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir. Now I request Professor Narendra K. Rastagi, sir. He is the director of the Center for Global Business Studies in the School of Business. He is also a tenured professor and has been teaching in the department since 1987. He was a co-principal investigator for grant in the year 2000 and served as a campus coordinator for implementing the grant to develop and teach 4 programs online and served as a director of the online MBA in e-commerce. Sir, I invite Professor Narendra K. Rastagi, sir. Hello. Hello. Sir? Oh, just a minute, sir. 1 minute. Sir, Rastagi sir नहीं join किए क्या? Sir, Rastagi sir join नहीं किए क्या? आप ये हुआ, unmute नहीं किया हुआ.
अनम्यूट कर रहे हैं
अमित सर. हाँ, अमित सर.
Okay.
अमित सर. हाँ, ये आगे.
Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm sorry, I switched computers, so that created the challenge, I guess. Again, thanks a lot, Shakti Sinha. You provide a very good perspective. I also would like to thank Professor Bhagwati Prasad Sharma, Vice Chancellor, Gautam Buddha University, for his invitation. And it's my great honor to collaborate with him. I am taking a different perspective for my presentation today. My focus today is on achieving inclusive growth through multilateral collaborations using alternative medicine as an example. I start with a basic premise. As Shakti Sinha said, that individual leaders as well as individuals respond to incentives and invariably take decisions that serve their own interest. This applies to both rich as well as not so rich countries. Hello? To continue, in a democracy, the government needs to listen to voters and thus must look after the interest of people as well as businesses who are almost always driven by maximization of profits. Thus, it's in the government's role to design policies, for example, intellectual property policies, to balance interests of businesses, that is, they make reasonable profits, but not be exploitative in a situation like today, where the capacity to produce vaccines is limited for a life-threatening illness. It is also well known that infections increase, so does the possibility of emergence of a deadly virus to which current vaccines may not be effective. The Indian experience with the spread of virus during March to early May is an example of such a tragic scenario. In just 8 weeks, the average number of cases increased from 15,000 per day to a peak of around 400,000 per day. This resulted in severe shortage of oxygen and medicines, and several individuals died while waiting for a hospital bed. We also know that while a large percentage of population in high-income countries are vaccinated, less than 1% of individuals in emerging economies have received the vaccine. Individuals getting sick with no access to conventional medicines, as they are out of their reach because they were not available or because of the cost, alternative medicine is the alternative for them. The bright light here is that at least for milder cases, the regimen provided by Ayush works and has almost no side effects in post-COVID treatment. Studies supported by the Ministry of Ayush, Government of India, have shown that treatment of COVID using Ayurvedic medicines alone or in combination with conventional medicine is very effective, safe, and very affordable. Here, I would like to talk about an Ayush study and one of their initiatives to help Delhi police. In a study at the COVID Health Center of the All India Institute of Ayurveda, 432 patients received treatment, of which 402 completed it, and 94% chose standalone Ayurvedic treatment. After the treatment, in approximately 10 days, RT-PCR test was negative in 99% of cases, and more importantly, there was no death. In another initiative, 80,000 prophylactic kits were provided to Delhi police. Incidence rate for this group was much lower than the general Delhi population, while the death rate for this group was 1/3 of the death rate of Delhi in general. If such a result of a treatment were observed in the US, it would be breaking news for a long period of time and would be copied by the rest of the world. However, nothing like this happened. We still consider Ayurveda as grade B treatment, something the British did when they started registering Ayurvedic graduates as B class citizens, and allopathic doctors were registered as A class, and these allopathic doctors considered Ayurvedic doctors as inferior. Madras Medical Registration Act of 1914 even denied registration to Ayurvedic graduates who were serving 80% of the population. The complex where allopathic medicine is considered superior has continued. Current financial institutions are dominated by the thinking that conventional medicine methods alone have the answer and may not fund research and or collaboration for alternative treatments. In such a situation, especially where conventional treatment is either not available or is very expensive, should there not be another funding mechanism or a financial institution built to support alternative research and collaborations now and in the future to deal with such challenges? Thus, just as formation of World Bank IMF was the need of the time after World War II, with increased mobility and faster spread of diseases, in addition to WHO's Global Center for Traditional Medicine, an institution to fund speedier development, training of manpower to support, and development of logistics in a collaborative way across countries is the need today. To conclude, emerging economies have to collaborate and use their negotiating power to obtain vaccines at affordable prices, that is, look after their own interests, and in parallel, collaborate to find solutions to the problem using their own knowledge base, and finally, explore formation of financial institution or institutions to support such initiatives that would serve them now and in the long run. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. You have very elaborately you have given an idea about and that how the post-COVID the government management about logistic management as well as supply chain and how the Ayurvedic system mechanism and allopathic mechanism work here and the role of the multinational agencies, World Bank, WHO, and IMF can play a role regarding financing of these issues. Thank you very much, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now I invite Professor Nagesh Kumarji. He is Director and Chief Executive of the Institute for Studies in Industrial Development, ISID, a public funded policy think tank based in New Delhi. During the period May 2009 and April 2021, he served as a director at United Nations Economic and Social Commission for Asia and Pacific, where he has held a number of senior management roles. These include Chief Economist of the UNESCAP, Director of the Macroeconomic Policy and Development Division MPDD, and Director of the Social Development Division SDD. At the UNESCAP headquarters in Bangkok, head of the South and Southwest Asia SSWA, Office of the UN Economic and Social Commission for Asia and the Pacific, based in New Delhi. Sir, I invite Professor Nagesh Kumar. Please, sir.
Thank you very much for the invitation. I think on the theme of this, conference, which is very important, redesigning global financial architecture. I think my friend Professor Shakti Sinha has given a very comprehensive overview of the issues right from the beginning of the Bretton Woods times, the challenges that were there and how they were addressed, and the current existing problems. I would like to just
You are muted, Nagesh. We can't hear you.
No.
Maybe the administrator could unmute.
Yes. Okay. So yeah. So I would like to focus on this instability caused by the hot money flows, which he was referring to, or the short-term capital flows, which you have seen in a lot of evidence in the post-global financial crisis times. What happened in the global financial crisis time, and which is also being repeated now, is the fact that the industrialized countries, including US and all others, try to expand liquidity in a massive manner to revive their economies in these times of crisis. And that is what exactly was done after the collapse of Lehman Brothers in 2008. And so this money, or the expanded money supply, which was nearly available free, because the interest rates were kept very, very, very low. So this money tries to flow out of the United States and other such developed countries in search of better returns. And it was flowing out to the emerging markets like India. And so you find a situation when the economy is down because of the global financial crisis, but the stock markets are booming because the short-term capital flows are coming to your shores. And so that happened at that time. There was a booming stock market. Few years later, when Fed, American Federal Reserve, which is like our Reserve Bank of India, we started to think about unwinding. Now that things have become, the crisis is in control, let us try to unwind this EG money or quantitative easing kind of policy. And just by whispering that, there was a term used, taper tantrum. So taper tantrum in 2013 brought down all the markets around the world, including Indian stock market. And rupee, depreciated very sharply. We remember that. It's not too far back in the memory. And then Indian government had to take number of steps to avert the collapse. One was to launch the NRI bonds. The other was to enter into a bilateral swap agreement with the government of Japan. And then that is how the crisis was averted. Now I feel, India was clubbed among the fragile 5 economies at that time. So other emerging markets, which were similarly exposed to the short money or short-term capital flows, like Brazil or Turkey or Indonesia. So we were in a group of 5 countries which were called as Fragile Five. And so the steps were taken by the government and RBI to avert the collapse, and we came out of it. Now, again, I feel that the similar situation is around us. So since last year, when the economy was contracting, Indian economy contracted by 6, 7, or 8% in 2021. However, stock market, look at how it has done from 28,000 Sensex 28,000 to 53,000, in 1 year. So why it is happening when economy is affected very badly by the pandemic and the lockdowns? It is because the short-term capital flows, again because of quantitative easing in the advanced countries, is finding its way to emerging markets like India, because here they can make money and go back. So there is a build-up of asset bubbles in stock markets. There's, a small number of stocks are being chased by the FIIs. They are bringing the free money from the Western world and investing in stock markets. But when there is again unwinding of that policy, there will be again a taper tantrum and Fragile Five kind of situation. So we should prepare for it. We are heading into a lot of instability, like we did in 2013 and 14, and and then so what I'm trying to drive home is that we need to find a solution, to a credible and durable solution to these cycles of upswings, because of short-term capital flows come in, and when they go in hordes. They go, all of them together, and bring down your stock markets, bring down the currencies or exchange rates, and create a lot of instability in the system. So it's just becoming a cyclical thing, and the global financial architecture has really to be reformed to bring an end to this. And so what do you do to do that? There is, this James Tobin was an economist who talked about throwing sand in the wheels of short-term capital flows. So and that is why it's throwing sands in the wheels of short-term capital flows. What he meant was imposing some kind of capital flow management measures, like a tax, global financial transaction tax, which will make it less easy for these FIIs to bring in and take out money, and it will become it will make it a little bit more costly, and in that process you earn some revenue. But there is a problem of prisoner's dilemma. If you or Indian government was to impose this financial transaction tax, then all of this money will run out of India, and you will face a very difficult situation. But if all of the countries in the framework of IMF or multilateral or global financial architecture agree to something like that, because it can only be done multilaterally, then this movement of rapid movement of short-term capital flows can be moderated, and in that process you earn some revenue which could be put to good use, like for sustainable development, for inclusive development, for poverty reduction, or for making India whatever have you. So I think the need of the hour is to seek a broad consensus on the reform of global financial architecture, to spatially constrain or moderate the short-term capital flows, which bring so much of instability. And it is very difficult for developing countries like India to be dealing with so much of exchange rate and stock market or capital market volatility, and also financial market volatility. Because when they come, stock markets are elevated. The banks lend on the basis of the collateral of these shares, which are at highly elevated levels. And when they go out, these short-term capital flows, when they go out and bring down the stock markets, the collateral values of collateral also goes down with that. And bringing instability to exchange markets, the capital markets, and the financial sector. And so highly destabilizing, and we need to find a solution for that. I think India going to be chair of G20 in 2023. And I think if nothing else happens before that, perhaps India should take this agenda forward as a chair of G20. So I think this is one concrete reform of global financial architecture that is waiting to be done, and some leadership is needed. Perhaps India could drive this agenda in the coming years. So I will stop here. Thank you very much once again for giving me this opportunity and for the invitation. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Very interestingly, sir, you have touched the area of the flow of capital across the world, particularly the fragile economy. You have touched the area of the flow of capital across the world, particularly the fragile economy. And particularly, sir, you have focused about to the short-term capital flow and differentiated between the long-term capital flow regarding stability into the exchange rate, as well as you have also put up the idea regarding the financial transaction tax and regarding the collateral issue. Very nice, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Thanks again, sir. Now I invite Professor Piyush Ranjan Agrawal, sir, former Vice Chancellor of V. Bahadur Singh Purvanchal University and Awadh Pratap Singh University, Rewa, Madhya Pradesh. Sir is formerly Head School of Management Studies and Department of Humanities and Social Sciences, Motilal Nehru National Institute of Technology, Allahabad. He has the experience of over 33 years of teaching and research and has served before University of Allahabad as a faculty professor and head and dean, professor, Faculty of Management Studies, H.S. Gaur University, Sagar also. He has the credit of publishing more than 50 articles and research papers and 6 books as an author and co-author on various contemporary issues on accounting and finance and global capital. So I request and I invite Professor Piyush Ranjan Agrawal, sir.
Thank you, Rakesh. First of all, I congratulate Professor Sharma, Vice Chancellor of the University, and his team, Dr. Arvind Kumar Singh, and all the organizing members, and the speakers with me, those who have been speaking so far, Professor Satya Singh, Professor Kustubi, Professor Nagesh Kumar. I'm finding Professor Garg also. So today I'm making a small presentation of within the time I have been allotted, that ushering an era of post-pandemic new world order and integrated financial system. This could be a sub-theme of the theme for today's conference, Next, please. I divide Indian economy in 2 parts. First part, post-independence till 1991, and part 2, the 91-92 reform till date 2021. And what we have witnessed in last 30 years, or rather 30th year of economic reform, almost all the political parties in the country, they have pushed it onwards, and now it is reaching to a stage of maturity in terms of economic reform. Briefly, the backdrop of the reform process was its high indebtedness that reached to 38.8% in 91-92. Forex reserve was very small to meet the requirement 15 days. The import cover was very short. We had reached to a stage of risk. We have borrowed a $2.5 billion from IMF at that time. We remember that to seek $50 million a loan, short-term loan, we have to place the money, gold, and that gold was transported from Bombay port, that is Mumbai airport, to the bank vaults outside the country. Inflation rate was 16%, and very alarmingly, the USSR, which was very close, we were very close to them, rather very close allied to them, had disintegrated by the time. And there was a marked shift that Indian economy has started moving from a debt economy to equity economy first time. So this was the beginning of the show, 91, 92. Next, please. Rakesh, next.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Next slide.
Yes, sir.
Everybody knows it was a process of delicensing, and what we have reached today from year 1992. Second slide, please. Where we have reached today from delicensing in 1992, that in August 2020, Atmanirbhar Bharat mission has been announced by the government of India. Now we have the foreign investment channels through FDIs, FPIs, external commercial borrowings. Even 2020, a very strong step has been initiated, that we have been the largest importer of the defense products. Now we have opened the defense sector also to FDI. We have opened the capital account convertibility, but still the current account is not so open. But when we have attracted the multinational in e-commerce, especially the e-retails, the very restriction of the current account convertibility is also going down. There is a thrust on renewable energy, and in long run, by next 10 years, 20 years, that shall unburden our trade balance, because presently we are dependent on 85% import of the oil requirement. Another major shift that happened in last few years was the introduction of GST in 2017. Next, please. In 30 years, we have been reaching to a stage of globalizing our own economy. That the world is coming very close to free flow of goods, services, technology, knowledge, people, capital across the continents. And in this, all these attributes, three are transferable on real-time basis in the IT era, that is information, services, and capital. And what we have seen in this pandemic duration, lockdowns, there was a massive disruption of supply chain, but very float of the money, services, and capital remain uninterrupted because of the presence of ICT in the country, and we have been close in network with the rest of the world. What is money? Money is a conveyor belt over which the goods and services are being transported. And in international market, the forex that facilitates the global transactions. So slowly, as the FIs and FDIs have surged in a very long way in the country, and it is making a presence in the balance of payment statement. For Indian forex balance of payment statement, the very relevance of the IMF contribution to in the crisis is now bleeding out. So IMF, if we talk about, it is not that IMF for us as it was in the year 1991 and 92. Next, please. Last month, there was an article by Mr. C. Rangarajan and Mr. Dr. Srivastav, and what they have predicted, that our fiscal deficit will be more than double. It was 1920, it was 7.1 lakh crore, which may reach to 16.3 lakh crore. that will be around 7.8% GDP. So this is for the government of India, and for the state government, that shall be the separate one. So this is an area of concern for government of India, that how can we fill up that gap and without stopping the trajectory of growth in the country also. Next, please. In the meantime, the federal rate of interest has been raised from 2% to 2.5%. And whenever there's an increase in the interest rate, as has been discussed, the FPI, they reverse the process of investing in the country. That puts pressure on us. The forex is outflown. And in India too, the interest rate has to increase. And when we are borrowing to meet our fiscal deficit, still RBI is trying hard to keep the rate of interest to a moderate level. Next, please. I have got a feeling that there are the 5 external fronts where India has gained during the pandemic period. The first one is the fall in current account deficit, because there has been a consumption and decline in price and the consumption of crude oil, and as well as there is a fall in international interest rate across, because the demand for capital has come down. Second part is that the very surge of the inflow in the FPIs and FDI has been very high, and today the market capitalization has crossed $3 trillion, and our forex reserve has also crossed $600 million. Emotionally, when I discussed 92, the gold was exported, rather was placed in the European Bank, and in the financial year 2021, RBI bought additional 42 tons. They diversified their portfolio for forex reserve, and that was purchased to diversify the portfolio. And another very important point is that NRI remittances, which was there was a fear that it will fall in the financial year 2021, it remained above $80 billion, and this has been contributing a lot toward the capital account of the country. Next, please. If we see in last 40 years, every decade, every 10 years, there is a fallout. 1987, US Black Monday, October 19, when Dow Jones crashed by more than 22.6% across. There was the ripples, Hong Kong, Tokyo Stock Chain, Amsterdam Stock Chain, London Stock Chain, but there was no ripple in the country, but because Indian economy was closed at the time. We were like a castle closed from across. But 92 onwards, when we opened, there was Southeast Asian crisis on devaluation of Thai baht. 10 years after, there is eruption of subprime crisis, when 2007-8, Sensex crashed from 21,000 plus to almost 8,000 points. And in 10 years, 12 years after, there's a COVID pandemic, but still the Sensex is 52,000 points. So there have been the global fallout, and we're the part of it now, where it is on the financial side, on the political side, or the strategic side, or the diplomatic side, or the in terms of the now health also. Next, please. When we are talking about the promotion of economic stability and sustainable growth, nothing is possible without the international collaboration and a mechanism drawn with. In October 2018, a report was submitted by the group of the eminent experts group, and this group was formed by G20 nations, and this submitted report, the title was Making the Global Financial System Work for All. And what they observed that this report is submitted on the pretext of completion of 10 years after subprime, and they submitted 22 proposals. They submitted 22 proposals that how the member countries in G20 and the rest of the world could contribute collectively to the development of a new global area. And though this was pre-pandemic, but what I find going through the report, that still this proposed architecture has to be considered in terms of the governance of the system of financial institution, international financial institution, whether it is a World Bank or IMF and other institutions. Next, please. The meaning of what they have covered while they are talking about the international financial institution, all the financial institutions, whether it is IMF or Development Bank or ADB or other institutions. So this is, they covered all that 22 proposals to that how their services could facilitate a new mechanism to go for globalization of the financial system in the world. Next, please. You can say there are a few preambles about that they propagated the common regulatory mechanism in the world, especially in terms of investment in infrastructure. They talked about the sharing of the common knowledge. They talked about the networking and the collection of data together, pursuance of the new research, policy making. They talked about that how the countries can strengthen themselves for inclusive growth also, especially the inclusive domestic market also. They talked about the IMF liquidity to facilitate the BOP crisis if any country is facing about. We did it in 91, 92, but there are the countries who are facing very frequently. So many policy proposals they have given in this report. Next, please. There is another report that has been a part of Bretton Woods project, and this report is especially drawn on to cover the criticisms that World Bank and IMF is facing today. And this report is again dealing with the very features of the criticism in the new era of economy, new era of the global world. The IMF and World Bank is failing to serve the world together. And there are so many points they have covered on the human side, the environment side, technological side, the financial side, and so many other issues, political side, all that. But one observation they have given is that their IMF Independent Evaluation Office, that is IEO, and Independent Evaluation Group IEG failed to forecast crisis of subprime 2008. Not only this, it is 87. There was no prediction. In 1997, Southeast Asian crisis, there was no prediction, the same discussion. In 2008, 7 and 8, subprime, there was no prediction. In the case of pandemic on COVID-19, there was no mechanism to forecast it that on such a wide scale, such a massive scale, this is spread over the world. Because in any efficient market system, if there could be a forecast about it, market has the capacity to discount any such crisis before it happened or it takes place. Next, please. Rakesh, next. If you try to evolve any global financial architecture for discussion together, it is in the Indian context and the rest of the world. So I'm putting 5 tests to my understanding about the subject, that there cannot be any collaboration between inequals. If you want a seamless integration of financial world together, they have to be equal in terms of macroeconomy, their infrastructure, their system, their regulation, everything. You should be strong enough. Then your market should be, especially the economic and financial market, should be efficient market in terms of its turnover, in terms of its size, in terms of its depth, in terms of its resilience, in terms of its diversification. Now, and this kind of architecture is possible if there is a trusteeship, there is a transparency in the mechanism the country is operating for, there is a democratic setup. if you want that China should be part of it, but about the sharing of data, there will be a problem. There should be a common regulatory mechanism and institution, whether it's a judicial or democratic or financial institution, any such institution, that mechanism should be in place and is properly developed. And fourth test could be there is a deep ICT inception, that you have your data, your information is digitized, you are duly networked to deep of the population, your data storage system is strong and safe, secured. And there is need for initiating reform at every level, at top to down and down to up, especially in terms of taxation and other regulatory policies. These are the 5 tests if you want to evolve any self-financial architecture. Next, please. To me, if I put Indian economy to these 5 tests, being the 5th largest economy in the world, it qualifies on traveling long for 30 years. To join such process of designing and evolving any such new global financial architecture, we have the IT, we have the mechanism, we have the market, we have introduced GST, we have the institutional mechanism to govern the things, and so many. We have so we are not that kind of economy where we're dependent on others. Rather, we are more interdependent with each other. So there could be a seamless integration. So on 5 tests, so if we can succeed, India can go ahead with the integration of the process, and I can say this shall be one step ahead, moving towards the principle laid under the purchasing power parity laid by Carl Gustav Castle, the law of one price, 1980. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Sir has touched such a vast and such a large canvas, all comprehensive issue, right from the Indian economic policy, right from the independence till now, regarding particularly to the foreign capital, commercial borrowings, and then its impact on the FDI and foreign institutional investors. Then along with the role of the IMF and World Bank, and thereupon then how the different issues regarding tax structure, the as well as the role of the emerging economies, and a recent study by the G20 and their suggestion regarding the economic stability and financial restructuring, that you have touched and lot of issues in within 10 minutes that you have to understand all these things. So thank you very much, sir. Thank you all. Happy Guru Purnima, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Now I invite Professor S.P. Gargi, presently settled in Chicago, visiting management professor, key speaker, mentor, and independent consultant, career coach, and author with more than 45 years of multidimensional, multicultural, and professional experience of management of institutions, board functions, organizational development, HRM and training, international business, bank management, banking operations, business development, strategic planning, including overseas assignments and academics, particularly MBA education. Professor Garg has a special interest in strategy management, transformation, change management, leadership development, international business, and bank management. Professor Garg is presently contributing as chief patron and chairman of Ask Education, higher education consultancy organization, executive director, Jagan Institute of Management Studies, James, Jaipur, and management consultant to several startups. Now, I request Professor Garg, sir, kindly share your views. Sir, please unmute, sir. Please, sir, unmute.
Hello.
Okay, sir. Yes, sir. Audible, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting me for this wonderful webinar. My sincere thanks to Dr. Sharma, Dr. Rajkumarji, Shakti Sinhaji today for this session, and other dignitaries for the seminar. First of all, I would like to make it very clear that after listening all these experts and the stalwarts, those who have touched upon all the background of these developmental issues. I'm basically a practical banker. I'm basically a practical person. So I would be touching upon this complex topic from my own angle, that is the financial stability, inclusive growth, and challenges for Indian banking system. People talk from local to global. Here we are talking from global to local. I would be more focusing on the practical issues over here. Please bear with me. We must take the lessons from the past. All other speakers, particularly Sinha ji and Agrawal ji, they have touched upon the background of all other developments. But here, and change is permanent. What else is there? Nothing. It is a change only. So in the present context, what is to be done? And keeping in view the profile of all our stalwarts over here, other listeners also, readers also, those who are attending this webinar, I have my practical points related to how the banking system in India has contributed for inclusive growth as well as with the financial stability. Friends, the most important point is Indian banking system is the backbone of the economy. As Dr. Agarwal has mentioned, that money flows only with the banking channels only. For that purpose, if we go into the background, since nationalization of Indian banking system, a lot of water has flown, not only flown, overflown. So many changes have taken place. Structural transformation has taken place as per the needs of the hour, as per the expectations of the World Bank, IMF, and all other institutions. Reserve Bank of India has been in the forefront to introduce all these changes. Sometimes we see privatization to the public, and sometimes recently we have seen from public to private also. All these have put up pressure on the Indian banking system. But however, banking system has been successful in the implementation of the various programs. I started my banking career 1969 after my MBA from IIM Ahmedabad long back. So I'm basically, in those days, the banking, there was only about 8,000 branches of the Indian banking system in India. Now you see more than 240,000 branches and so many ATMs also. So what I want to say, so many changes have taken place and banking has implemented for inclusive growth starting from IRDP, PMRY, and all other programs. So what I would like to mention, what are the need of the hour, and particularly those who are the students who would be joining the banking fold, for them there are certain practical suggestions also. From strategic planning point of view, there are certain key areas. First of all, I personally feel that banking system, whether local, domestic, or international, they will have to be strong in the operations. I was in charge of my US operations also. So I believe that international business and international banking has to be a very strong forte. And without knowing the Forex, without knowing the international systems, payment systems, rules, regulations, laws, we will not be in a position to take care of the expectations of the international organizations. Professor Agrawal has mentioned about the Rangarajan. Definitely, M. Narasimham, Rangarajan, all R.K. Talwar, sir, they are the stalwarts of the Indian banking system who have given the shape for financial stability. Coming to the point of this BIS, Bank for International Settlement, because we have to follow the rules and regulations, whether it is the NPA management, stress assets, etc. We have to make our foundation strong and to take care of the various legal requirements also. Then subsequently, if we see in this corona pandemic crisis also, if there is a Chinese proverb, every crisis has the two things. One is the opportunity and second is the crisis. So we have to take best advantage of this thing also. So Indian banking system in the present context, if you see all the various government sponsored programs as approved by Reserve Bank of India have been implemented by the banking system only. So it is a big achievement. What do we expect in our inclusive growth? How to support the common man, how to support the small businesses, how to support the professionals, how to support each and every state of the society. And I feel delighted that Indian bank system, coupled with other institutions like NBFCs and other institutions, have come up to a reasonable expectations to fulfill the aspirations of the common man. And this process continues. Recently, as we are aware that Reserve Bank, with the permission of the Reserve Bank of India and the Government of India, Ministry of Finance, bad bank has also been constituted. It means the stress management is very important. NPA management is very important. All the bad assets will be managed over there. So it is a positive direction. Now, in the same thing, when we talk of the other issues of the financial stability, the very important point that we must have the close coordination with the multilateral organizations at the global level, particularly for managing the inflow of the funds, trade finance, and other related aspects. So, in the context of our inclusive growth again, digitalization has been taken care of by the banking system in a very big way, and all these payment system, whether it is through the UPI, through the Paytm and all others, has given a lot of push, particularly to the rural customer. And this is the inclusive growth. Now, my request to all the management and other engineering institutes and the faculty members, there is a need for developing a strong coordination, liaison with the corporate bodies, development institutions, research organizations. And here I'm happy that this organization is also attached with us for this conference. And we should develop some rural immersion, social immersion programs for our students, for some faculty members also, so that in the real sense, inclusive growth is witnessed in our country. And this should, as other speaker has mentioned, we must take care of the Atmanirbhar Bharat projects also. And only when we take care of the India's development, skill development, global development, export business, then definitely we would be in a position to give the better shape to our new India, new Bharat program. And I'm very, very confident whatsoever limitations are there with our multilateral cooperation, multi-level agency support, whether it is a loan, whether it is a donation or any other thing. Now India is in the forefront. India is in the forefront. Forget about the last 40 years or so. With the new vision for our India, definitely all of us, particularly the Indian financial institutions, very well can do well. And what is needed, as Professor Agarwal has mentioned about the trust and transparency, that is the key word. That is the key thing. Without trust and transparency, we cannot perform, we cannot survive, whether it is the international, whether it is the local, and whatsoever it may be. And finally, I would like to say, though we have a lot of respect for the history, earlier developments, but the real process of contributing for the nation building or for the inclusive growth or for financial stability is learn, unlearn, and relearn. We cannot survive only on the past achievements or the past developments also. And finally, inclusive growth will come when we take care of our nature, environment too also. If we little bit some activities we do around us, definitely we would be going for the inclusive growth through the banking system, through the academic institutions, research institutions. And finally, what I would like to say, in life, what matters? Create and spread happiness. Only happiness matters. That only leads to inclusive growth, nothing else. जय हिंद, नमस्कार आप सभी को। मैं जयपुर को बिलोंग करता हूं, लेकिन वर्तमान में जैसा अभी सिंह साहब ने बताया, मैं शिकागो में सेटल्ड हूं, और जो भी कुछ मेरे से सेवा होती है, मैं इंस्टीट्यूशंस की, स्टूडेंट्स की और इंस्टीट्यूशंस की अपनी तरफ से करने का कोशिश करता हूं। बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। मैंने इस थोड़े से टाइम में अपनी बात आपके सामने प्रस्तुत करने का प्रयास किया है। भारत में पूरा विश्वास है, हम सब मिलकर भारत को नई दिशा की ओर आगे बढ़ाएंगे, चाहे हमें मल्टीलेटरल कोऑपरेशन मिले या ना मिले, मिलेगा. No one can ignore India now. No one can ignore India. While sitting in America, in Chicago, every day I feel wherever we go, Indian community, Indian stalwarts, intellectual capital is respected, appreciated, acknowledged. That is the beauty of our India, new development process. Thank you very much for inviting me and giving this opportunity. Thank you very much.
बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर आपको, बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद सर. आपने बहुत अच्छे से सर इंडियन बैंकिंग सेक्टर की ग्रोथ और उस इंक्लूसिव ग्रोथ के पॉइंट को सर रीच किया है. और हम लोग 8000 ब्रांच से आज 240 लाख ब्रांच तक आ चुके हैं. और जो इंडियन बैंकिंग सेक्टर का इंडियन इकोनॉमी में जो रोल है, एक बैकबोन, एक पिलर ग्रोथ है, आपने उसको एम्फसाइज किया है सर. And no doubt said that none of the any institution can ignore the Indian economy today, that the size of we have. And thank you very much, sir. Thank you very much, sir. That from your from there, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Now I invite Mr. Hari Kumar ji, S. Hari Kumar. He is Assistant General Manager at Punjab National Bank, nearly having 25-year experience in the area of foreign exchange business and holds MSc in International Banking from University of Reading, UK. He has also attended training programs at Swiss National Bank Study Center and IIM Kozhikode, and presently he is also pursuing a PhD from Gautam Buddha University. So I invite Mr. Hari Kumar ji, and he is pursuing his PhD particularly into the area of IMF and its role in the Southeast Asian crisis, particularly in 2007 onwards. So welcome, Hari Kumar ji.
Good evening, sir. Respected Vice Chancellor, sir, and other distinguished scholars on the subject. I am a banker who works in the field. It's a proud privilege and honor for me to share platform with such an eminent scholars in international political economy. So this is one way of inclusive policy of the university. Thanks for the organizer to giving me chance to people like us from the field. In a few minutes from now, I just want to touch upon global financial safety net and its relevance to financial stability, as well as protecting the growth of developing economies in particular. In few minutes, I just want to explain the certain basic things actually to understand all in this present in the global financial crisis. We have seen a series of bank failures. We have seen sovereign debt crisis. We have seen huge liquidity issues. But in this COVID crisis, we have not yet witnessed such type of dramatic events. But of course, there was issues of liquidity in US sometimes in March and June 2020. So, and in between, we have seen, as Sarah has mentioned, there is a exuberance in the market. Market is excited about a scope of recovery. So, does it mean that we are safe in a safe zone? This is the question before us. To have a quick recap of what has happened in global financial crisis. Me, along with Dr. Srivastav and Dr. Vivek Misra, in our own humble way, I just was tracking IMF activities in 2008 and 2003, the critical period of global financial crisis. What we have observed is during that critical period, almost 80 countries have come to IMF for assistance. Some around 38 odd countries were taking concession lending programs, and 40 odd countries from low income group were coming to IMF and taking assistance for assistance from the PRGP fund. Then we try to track it subsequent to the crisis, that is somewhere 2014 to 18. What we've seen that among the concession lending group, 20 to 30% has further again gone to IMF. Then among the low developing economies, 50% has again gone to IMF. It shows that okay, there was some stress in their economy. That's why they have again. And we also tried to track the major economic indicators from 2008 to 18. And what we have seen is that, of course, there is obviously all the economic indicators were down in the critical period. Later, from 2014 to 2018, most of the indicators were coming up, and most of the economies were have recovered growth, or they were more stable. Then, as you move to 2020 March, things changed dramatically. Almost all economies are are under stress. So then let us look at that, how many now at this moment, after in the last 16, 17 months, 85 countries have already come to IMF for assistance. So if you compare how many countries have come from IMF for the global financial crisis and during the pandemic crisis, the grouping, the geographical distribution is almost similar, except for that there are more countries from Europe during the crisis period. Now it is less, but more from Africa. So it means that the things are not very stable, or the what you call the immune system of the financial market is a bit compromised. So there is a possibility of a risk. It may happen, it may not happen. We may be lucky enough, nothing happens actually. So in this context, we bring the concept of a global financial safety net. Global financial safety net is nothing but a network of arrangement which consists of for forex reserve, as I was telling, it was some of the countries like India is having a very good reserve. Then there is called central bank swap, which the US is has leadership. Then we have got some regional financial arrangements, and finally the IMF. So these are the four menu available for you to the countries when they are in a crisis. Actually, among all these four group, what we have observed in the global financial crisis was the central bank swap was very, very effective in the sense that it really calmed the market. Actually, that Federal Reserve governor with the skill of a what you call a great music conductor, he has orchestrated that swap lines, calmed the market, and it is quite commendable. Same liquidity swap arrangement is again being done now in somewhere in 2020. That option is there. That is number two. So the fact of the matter is that all these options are not available to everybody. It is available. Some swap is available to advanced economies, and forex reserve. Everybody don't have the luxury of having huge forex reserve. And coming back to IMF, they come with conditionalities. So what is the situation? What is there for the low-income countries? And more importantly, liquidity is one aspect for the financial market. So even for a common man, liquidity is very critical when he is in trouble. Same is for a country. So that is what I was connecting that swap arrangement, which was very, very effective at that point of time. So that who will provide the liquidity? So taking cue from the central bank, the swap in 2008, IMF was also slightly excited. So they have also similar product was created, flexible credit line. Now in this crisis, they have created another product called short-term liquidity line, something like a credit card. But again, all this comes with some sort of conditionality. It is not available to everyone. Stigma is attached to the programs. Countries are not eager to take it. So what we really require in time of crisis, in times of liquidity crisis, something like an oxygen therapy we required. It is required immediately on demand. It is required for a shorter period. It should be required uninterruptedly. But which the countries should not wander around IMF fees to get that money. This is the point we want to make it actually. What I mean to say is that say a boy who sells some snacks in the Mexican beaches, he doesn't understand what is ex ante, ex post conditionality, electric reforms, monetary stability framework, all this aspect. He simply remembers his little sister's hungry face, and he has to feed them. And there is no people in the beach. He don't have income. So this type pain of the ordinary people on the ground should be reflected in the boardroom of IMF. This is one aspect we want to stress upon it. In nutshell, I want to make a simple point is that low-income countries should, the IMF should be more lenient about framing policies so that low-income countries get credit whenever there is a crisis. Once the crisis has already crept into the economy, then it will have a devastating effect. Prior to that, they should also have some sort of liquidity line without much conditionalities attached to it, with the human touch. But for us, Sir was telling the senior banker, for any banker, moral hazard is a serious issue, so we should not ignore it. One more point I would like to add is that why we are again and again talking about IMF is, with all that problem, all that criticism associated with IMF, IMF is still the most powerful financial organization. It has got the maximum resource, and it has got the the regional expertise of IMF is the best actually. The article for meetings and the reports are most comprehensive. So they know the developing world, low income group much better than anybody. But bringing more human touch to the policies, conditionalities, taking care of people, the feelings of the people, since is one important thing. They must be more sensitive to the feelings of the people, because there are almost 100 million people have already pushed to the poverty because of this pandemic. This is what one point I would like to mention. Thanks, Lord, sir. It's a privilege to be again with you people. Thank you.
Thank you, Hariji. Thank you very much. You have given a good comprehensive idea about that how IMF lends to various member countries in the form of various facilities, particularly the extended fund facilities, standby facilities, and contingent trade facilities designed to serve specific purposes, but essentially aimed at balance of payment stabilization or meeting emergent foreign exchange needs, as well as particularly the role of the IMF regarding the poor nation and weaker economy, and how the IMF has managed the crisis in the various countries. So well done that you have shared all these issues. Thank you very much, Riji. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Now I invite our colleague, Dr. Amit Awasthi ji, Head of Mathematics Department, for introducing the team for the webinar and concluding the webinar. As we have done the 2 days webinar on this particular redesigning financial architecture, global financial crisis and redesigning financial architecture, particularly in the balance of the role of IMF and World Bank. The key terms which we had drawn from the 2 days study, 2 days discussion discourse by the various galaxies of the professors and eminent personalities from the industry and academia, that the role of US, particularly the trade relations, trust and transparency, inclusive growth, financial stability, and policy for developing economies, and the role of IMF and World Bank in the changing new world order. And in that context, that we have done the 2 days webinar on, and the various eminent personalities have shared their views. So I invite Dr. Amit Awasthi ji. Amit sir.
Namaskar. On behalf of the webinar chairman, I, Dr. Amit Kumar Awasthi, Head of Department of Applied Mathematics, extend sincere thanks to organizing team members for their excellent support provided in promotion and organization of this 2-day event, and for its grand success. The team has done an excellent job. I take this opportunity to introduce them to speakers and participants. These are from Swadeshi Jagran Manch, Shri R. Sundaram ji, Shri Kashmiri Lal ji, Shri Satish Kumar ji, Shri Aswani ji, and from Gautam Buddha University itself, Professor N.P. Malkania is Dean Academics at Gautam Buddha University. Dr. Niti Rana, she is Dean Buddhist and Humanities. Dr. Arvind Kumar Singh, Director of International Affairs, is co-convener of this event. Dr. Krishna Kant Dwivedi, Dean in charge, School of Law, Justice and Governance, is co-convener of this event. Dr. Vivek Kumar Mishra, HOD Political Science and International Relations, is also co-convener of this event. Dr. Dinesh Kumar Sharma, University Coordinator Research. Dr. Rakesh Kumar Srivastava, University Coordinator Admissions. Dr. Ombir Singh, Assistant Professor, School of Management. Dr. Rupali Srivastava, in charge, Department of Economics, Planning and Development. Dr. Satish Kumar Mittal, Assistant Professor, School of Management. Dr. Ajay Kansal, Assistant Professor, School of Management. The success of this event is due to all the above members. So it's my I want to pay my thanks to all these team members. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit sir. Thank you very much for your IT support and developing all these things, logistic management support, sir. Now I invite Professor Vijay Kaulji from Swadeshi Research Institute, New Delhi, for vote of thanks. Professor Vijay Kaulji.
Thank you, Arvindji. Thank you very much. Namaskar to all of you. It gives me a great pleasure to propose a vote of thanks to all the speakers, organizers, and knowledge partners. The world is witnessing the recurrence of crises, one after another. During the last few decades, we see the financial crisis and the global warming as a environmental crisis, and now this global health crisis. And every speaker has spoken that whenever there is a crisis, the developing countries and the poor are the worst affected by these crises. Their problems of poverty, unemployment, inequalities are continuing. Even UN has also identified the sustainable development goals to overcome these problems. Current COVID pandemic has accelerated the problems of developing world. To recover from these crises, we need finance and investment. Here, the role of global financial architecture is important. Present global financial architecture, as has been discussed by the speakers, is dominated by the advanced countries. Was established after World War II. Not much has changed in their operations and structure. China has attempted to create a new global financial architecture. Even yesterday there was a discussions to support its BRI project. This has led to the problems of debt trapping and acquisition of strategic assets properties by China. Very recently, G7 has also come up to augment the resources for developing countries looking at the Chinese threat. We need global financial architectures that can help recovery from crises, bring stability, and facilitate growth. Greener, sustainable, and inclusive growth. This 2 days seminars has been focusing in all these, and different speakers, they have discussed different aspects related to global financial architectures. This conference has discussed all these things, and today's discussions also, it's a wide variety of aspect has been discussed related to global financial architectures. Dr. Shakti Sinha has discussed about the lessons learned from the past in terms of the role of dollars, World Bank, exchange rates, COVID crisis, and the loose monetary policy. So he has suggested that we should learn when we are going to design this new global financial architectures, we should learn from the past. Professor Narendra Rastagi discussed the focus on inclusive growth and alternative medicines. He highlighted the role of Ayush and the developing countries. The current financial, and he highlighted that how financial institutions can help this alternate research projects can be funded by them so that they can contribute more to poor or emerging economies. And he has also highlighted about the emerging economies to collaborate and explore new financial institutions. Professor Nagesh Kumar from ISID, he focused on short-term capital flows, that how these short-term capital flows, they can create a instability. And he very interestingly, he has also highlighted that India can play a very important role because India is going to be the chair or G20 chair in the coming years, and can take a lead in bringing some regulations and some reforms in this aspect. So his points were also very interesting. Professor Agarwal has given a very exhaustive presentations looking at the reforms and He's also highlighted about the major shift that has taken place during the last 30 years. We are a part of integrated world, role of prudent macroeconomic mechanisms, US Fed roles, and he also identified about the global fallouts and its impact. Then he suggested that there has been some reports by G20, and there is a report by Bretton Woods project also. So these reports are very interesting, will be helpful in designing the global financial architectures. Mr. Garg from Chicago, US, also discussed about financial stability, inclusive growth, and the role of Indian banks. Mr. Hari Kumar discussed about the global financial crisis 2008. He also discussed about the IMF's assistance, that how IMF has assisted the countries, global financial safety net, the role of central bank, support that the poor countries can get from the IMF. The role of IMF also has been highlighted by Mr. Hari Kumar. So I take this opportunity to thank all the speakers for highlighting and sharing their views, giving insight about these issues. It's a very elaborate discussions, and different aspect has been covered by all. So I would also like to thank the organizers, all the participants for participating in this. Though I think there should have been some discussions about the question answer session also, but maybe because of the time it has not been possible. But I would like to take this opportunity to thank all the participants, organizing teams, and knowledge partners. Thank you very much.
थैंक यू सर, थैंक यू एवरीवन। मैं सभी गुरुजनों को आज से हैप्पी गुरु पूर्णिमा सर कह रहा हूँ। एंड नाउ आई रिक्वेस्ट एवरीवन टू रेज फॉर नेशनल एंथम।
विनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता, पंजाब सिंध गुजरात मराठा, द्रविड़ उत्कल बंगा, हिमाचल यमुना गंगा, उच्चल जलधि तरंगा, तव शुभ नामे जागे, तव शुभ आशीष मांगे, गाहे तव जय गाथा, जन गण मंगल दायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता, जय हे जय हे जय हे, जय 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 हे।
भारत माता की जय।
जय। ठीक है अमित सर का। Okay, now we can leave, sir. Okay. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
सभी को नमस्कार। नमस्कार। Thank you very much.
अमित सर नमस्कार।
सभी को नमस्कार।
नमस्कार सतीश जी।